Greetings from Indianapolis, Indiana, the racing capital of the world, for the final round of the Fanatec GT World Challenge America powered by AWS and the penultimate stop for the globe-trotting Intercontinental GT Challenge powered by Pirelli. The North American season comes to a close this weekend, and many of the world's top GT racers have joined the series regulars, setting the stage for a memorable third edition of the Indianapolis 8-Hour. Hello everyone and welcome to our live coverage of pre-qualifying here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, helping to set the stage for the 8-hour endurance test that is coming up tomorrow. My name is Ryan Marine. Amanda Busick will be down in the pit lane, and joining me in the broadcast booth all throughout the weekend, Calvin Fish and Bob Varsha. Calvin, it is an exciting weekend with championships on the line and a little added complexity with the Drivers and Manufacturers Championships for Intercontinental GT Challenge also in play.
Yeah, very much so. It's an exciting weekend. As you said, it's a combined event with the two championships running here together. It's round 13 in the Fanatec GT World Challenge America Championship. Double points on the line. And even though the pro ranks have been decided with Andrea Caldarelli clinching the championship with a brilliant sweep of the weekend at Sebring alongside his teammate Michele Beretta, who's not tied in the points because they obviously were not joined at the hip at the opening rounds of the championship. The AM championship has been decided with Scardina and Triarsi, but in Pro-Am, Ryan, we have a fantastic battle between three different teams, only separated by 15 points. As I said, 50 points on the line here today. So it's led by Jan Halen and Charlie Luck for Wright Motorsports. You got Colin Brown and George Kurtz aboard the CrowdStrike entry, and then Mario Farnbach, Ashton Harrison looked to be going all their way, and then they didn't start the race at Sebring. That's really put them in a bit of a hole. So there's going to be a lot of fighting in that championship, especially this weekend.
So much at stake. And Bob, what a fantastic venue, the historic, the iconic Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
No question about it. We talk about it year after year. You mentioned the phrase, and it's written all over the city of Indianapolis. This is the most famous race course in the world, and every driver in this lineup, no doubt, is thrilled to be here. As you saw, a lot of the cars are down there without their wheels and tires on, and that's part of the reason. There is a strong wind blowing, very cool temperatures here, and it's going to be even colder tomorrow. We get down into the 30s Fahrenheit, and these drivers are going to be very careful with their tires, I would imagine.
I agree, because think about Sebring. We had ambience in the mid-90s there to begin that weekend just a couple of weeks ago. Now we're just barely touching 50, 51 degrees right now. It's going warm up to about low 60s for this afternoon. As you said, much cooler for tomorrow, Bob. But that breeze, it is. I was just outside the cabin here, and it is a strong, stiff headwind as you come down that front straightaway here. And that will really have an effect on the cars through those high-speed corners, entering onto the speedway there. You'll have a lot of understeer with the front end just getting pushed a little bit, and down Holman, down the back stretch there as well, trying to push the cars on there. So that'll be something that the teams and the drivers will have to adapt to here in the early going of this session.
No question, it is a brisk fall day in America's heartland, but that said, at least it figures to be quite dry, unlike what we've seen in previous editions of this race. Well, now let's check in with the fourth member of the broadcast crew down patrolling the pits here at 16th and Georgetown. It's Amanda Busick.
I've really been enjoying you guys talking about the weather while you're sitting inside, and I'm outside in it experiencing the brisk and the cold, and you can always tell when drivers and team members already have their fire suits zipped up. They have beanies on down here on pit lane, so it is a brisk morning here at Indianapolis. We have 25 cars that are going to compete here this weekend in the Indy 8-Hour, and I love that when you kick off a season, you always think what's going to happen towards the last end of the race, and surely enough, we come in with storylines. You see those K-Pax cars behind me. In the pro side of SRO America, that one is locked up, but the Pro-Am is wide open, and that is currently your points leader. The Racer's Edge car just left from pit lane. They are all stacked together this weekend, guys. You're going to have the Porsche team here. You're going to have Racer's Edge, and then George Kurtz and them on the other side in this Pro-Am battle. But I want to go back to what we saw in Sebring. It was a heartache for the Racer's Edge team in Ashton. I'm sure you remember it just as well as anyone. How do you put that behind and focus on this weekend?
Well, you know, we had to reset our game plan coming into the Indy 8-Hour because we were hoping to be in the points lead, but since we lost that in the second race, you know, we have nothing to lose but every single thing to gain. And, you know, we're hoping to put on our best performance of the year. I feel like Mario and I have a great addition with Christina this weekend, so I'm looking forward to that. I think we have a really good shot. I mean, you know, we pretty racy with the Porsche and the Mercedes, but our Acura is on rails. It's as it always has been.
This place was great to you last year. As a driver, when you come into Indy, knowing the history that you've had here, is there some advantage to that, if only mentally?
Well, yeah, I think the advantage is that I know the Acura really well. My first GT3 race was in the Acura and with Mario and Matt McMurray. So I think coming into this weekend, Mario and I, we know how to do this race. We did it last year. And then Christina's very experienced with endurance races and with the Acura. So it was just an add-on to have her. And so I think that mentally we're checked in. You know, we're ready to do this thing, but also we're prepared. We know how to win this race.
Christina, first, welcome back. And how did this all come together for you?
How did it all come together? I mean, you know, first off, it started with Racers Edge and Ashton and Mario completing a great season. You know, they wanted to come in strong for the final race, and luckily I had experience with the NSX. You know, it's always a combination. You know, the few things that you're looking at in a driver is normally, you know, their history. Do they have experience with endurance racing? Do they have experience at the track? Would they have a car we're driving? So it's a lot of different factors, and luckily I checked a lot of those boxes, and I think that's what put me in the position here for the ride.
When we opened up the show here today, we were talking about the weather and the impact it may have on the car. How does it affect you guys as drivers?
I mean, this kind of weather is cooler inside, so it's more comfortable. But yeah, I mean, luckily in this series we have tire warmers, so we hit the ground hot. And yeah, it's our job then to keep it up there and keep it warm. But I would say the cooler temps, you know, for track conditions, for the engines, for us as drivers, it's all a benefit, but we'll drive in anything.
Good luck this weekend.
That's an interesting addition to that team. Christina Nielsen, a two-time GT champion in the International Motorsports Association events. And as I recall, she did it in two different kinds of cars, in a Porsche and in a Ferrari. So I don't think she'll have any problem adapting to this Acura.
Not much experience this year, however. It's been a slow season for Christina. Only race she's run was on fill-in duty at Spa with the Iron Lynx team earlier in the season in the World Endurance Championship, but got the chance to jump in this car. A great addition to the lineup alongside Ashton Harrison, and then Mario Farnbacher, Super Mario himself, behind the wheel. He had a starring drive just 1 week ago, Cal.
He did. He managed to pull off a brilliant victory at Petit Le Mans just last Saturday evening. A lot of pressure from a guy who's also in this race, Jordan Pepper. He's going to be driving with the K-Pax team, so we just pipped him. But you know, Super Mario gets up on the wheel. He knows this car like the back of his hand. He's a two-time champion here in North America with this chassis, so he'll be wheeling it. And obviously, with the Pro-Am category for the third driver, you had to bring in a bronze-rated driver. So in the past, it's been all about the Super Silver, but now it's the Super Bronze is what you're looking for. And I think Christina certainly fits into that mold.
And speaking of the Acura NSX GT3, as it's known here in the States, of course, those watching from overseas might know this car as the Honda NSX, but racing stateside, it is the Acura. This is the other one in the field, Realtime Racing, the famed team from Wisconsin, and the new addition to their lineup this weekend alongside Michael Cooper and Aaron Vogel is Taylor Hagler, fresh off a second consecutive TCR championship here in North America.
Well, ironically, she matched the only record that Christina Nielsen has with, you know, two championships here in North America as a female driver. So she's had an excellent season. She also knows this car very well, of course, running it here last year with the Racers Edge team. So she came into this weekend, I mean, not with a ton of seat time in this car recently, but talking to Nathan Bonneau, the Real-Time team manager, he said she was immediately up to pace. Very impressed with how she quickly adapted back to GT3 machinery.
Runner-up in the Pro-Am Championship last year in Fanatec GT World Challenge America, powered by AWS. 3 class wins, 8 podiums alongside Dakota Dickerson and Jacob Abel 1 year ago, and a graduate of the HPD GT3 Academy, which put her in that seat with Racer's Edge a year ago and left her very qualified to jump in this car at relatively late notice to help bolster the aspirations of Michael Cooper and Aaron Vogel.
Now, we should point out this is pre-qualifying, if we haven't already, and these times basically don't matter unless everything goes sideways in the scheduled qualifying sessions just a short while from now.
Yeah, the weather looks pretty consistent for the day, so we don't anticipate anything happening. But really, it's kind of a default in terms of a set of times that can be attributed to the 10 cars that will go forward to the pole shootout here later today. But the weather looks pretty good, admittedly a little bit breezy and a little bit cool compared to yesterday. But we anticipate this really just being a 90-minute practice session, a final tune-up for drivers who may be new to this circuit, and certainly to fine-tune the race cars, trying to find those last few tenths.
Qualifying coming up for the 8-hour at 1:55 local time. Pole shootout for the top 10 from that qualifying session later on this evening at 4:55. We talk about the cold temperatures here as we watch Frank Pereira, currently P2 on the leaderboard for the K-Pax Racing team. One other note this year that's different from previous editions of the Indianapolis 8-hour, it's a much later start time. It means we run not just into the twilight, but into the dark, past sunset here in Indianapolis. And drivers certainly took note of that during night practice last night. It is dark around this track. There's not much in the way of artificial lighting, especially in the infield.
Yeah, those last 20 minutes or so when we were watching here last night, Ryan, it was very dark, hard to identify the cars for us, which is going to be exciting over the last few minutes of this race, Bob. May hopefully keep it all straight, but for the drivers too, just getting that picture and getting those sight lines in during that practice session last night will be very important. I'm certain that the teams have already kind of decided who that finishing driver would be, and I would assume they would have got them in for those last 30 minutes last night when the track was at its darkest.
And it was pretty spectacular visually, watching these cars with their extremely bright headlights going around and around this track. Keep in mind, there are no overhead lights here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, so it gets country dark, as an old friend of mine used to say, really dark, except for a few standards that have been brought in to provide some light on the front straightaway. So it's definitely going to be a race you're going to want to watch all the way to the checkered flag.
And you'll get a chance to see something that's not been done in the history of this place. This facility opened in 1909. It's never had a race run into the dark. There was a Brickyard 400 a few years ago that had several delays.
It looked like it was good.
Green-white checkers. I think that was the year Casey Kane won, 2017, if memory is straight. So it's come close before, but in terms of actually finishing in night conditions, that has never been done in a competitive series at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. It will happen for the first time tomorrow.
Looking here at Miguel Molina circulating in the AF Corse number 51. This is actually a backup car, the car they originally arrived with. Pierre Rag destroyed it here, coming through this very corner here onto the front straightaway. I guess he'd been looking at simulations and computer and thought it was just like an extension of the straightaway, kept his foot in it. Well, guess what? On cold tires, or relatively cold tires, I'm sure they had them in the ovens a little bit. He backed it in pretty hard, so they had to switch to a backup chassis. But they're a top team. They take those sort of things in their stride. It was certainly a lesson for Pierre to identify that that final corner can be a corner when you got a little bit of tire dagger if the tires aren't fully up to temperature.
Yeah, what a way to greet your crew when they come to the racetrack. Oh, that's the car in that pile over there. Let's get the other one out.
Cost them quite a bit of track time, though, having to build that car back up. Missed the bulk of practice one, or test session one, I should say. Missed test session 2, made it out for night practice yesterday, but it's a really good driver lineup here. Rag, the least experienced of the trio, but Miguel Molina, for instance, right here. He's a former champion on North American soil back in the days it was known as Pirelli World Challenge in the Sprint X side of things. For the R Ferry Motorsport team out of Canada, he and Tony Vielander were quite the potent pairing, scoring 6 wins en route to the championship in Sprint X back in 2018. And of course, his exploits in European racing and global racing go really without needing to call too much attention to them. Anyone who's followed GT racing should know just how good this man is.
Let's ride aboard the 77 and just listen to the sound of this Mercedes V8. Such great race cars dominating the championship right now.
Yeah, in regards to the IGTC, Mercedes have a pretty unassailable lead, particularly with Audi in second place in the manufacturer standings, not having a car entered here this weekend, and Jules Gounon is in pretty good shape.
Yeah, you win the first 2 races of the championship with 1-2 finishes, you're going to be in pretty good shape.
Plus, you can have a drop score amongst those 4 races this year.
Yeah,
so
that'll complicate things even further.
We'll be checking in with you on that, Bob, in terms of the drop scores and all the points permutations.
And I want to thank you for summing up the entire season as we came on the air here. I didn't want to leave any stone unturned.
Reminds me of a friend of mine who got drafted into a NASCAR race at some point, and the opening question from his co-commentator was, just explain the NASCAR point standings system for us, would you?
Just tell somebody it was written on a cocktail napkin. That tells you everything you need to know. Speaking of great engine notes, how about these Lamborghinis? I understand the company is concerned with the inevitable trend to electrification of cars. They're wondering what they're going to do with their legendary 12-cylinder screamers.
Jason Harwood coming off a very impressive weekend at Sebring in GT America, Ryan. I really thought it was a standout weekend for him in terms of he didn't quite grab the win. George Kurt swept that weekend, but there was some fantastic racing. And talking to him since that weekend, I really feel that his racecraft has improved immeasurably this season. We love watching these guys who kind of come in pretty raw, maybe have some natural speed, but then you see how they develop as a driver in terms of handling traffic situations and passes for the lead and being repassed and settling back in and not panicking. So pretty cool.
Had a great run, as you said, at Sebring and GT America. He's been out of GT World Challenge America for a couple of rounds, back here this weekend in an AM class lineup. We'll have more on that throughout the course of the show, but with an hour and 17 minutes left here in pre-qualifying, back down to the pits now. Amanda Busick has more on this car.
Well, of one of the 11 pro entries here at the Indy 8-hour this weekend is the 96 BMW of Turner Motorsports. I was just talking to Will Turner about how the 3 of these drivers came together this weekend with the addition of John Edwards and how he's been a plug and play into this team. This is the first time that you guys will all race together. Robbie's currently out on the track. Will was saying that you guys are going to use this pre-qualifying to have everyone have experience and to go for some long runs here. Michael, how do you use this time to get ready for the weekend?
Yeah, I wasn't here for the test day on Wednesday. Didn't get that many laps in yesterday, so this session will just be about getting laps. It's my first time here in the M4, getting familiar with the track and, hopefully doing a nice long run to prepare for the race as well as a qual sim to get ready for quality later today.
John, I was talking to Will, and he was telling me about the similar size between you and Robbie, how that might help with some driver changes. What other kind of benefits do you guys see from the setups and what might relate with each other?
Yeah, I know Robbie well, and obviously we're both absurdly tall for race car drivers, so definitely makes it easy in terms of fit in the car. So, it's been fun to drive with him through the test day especially. We got to make a lot of setup changes and kind of get to know each other better. I know him from the IMSA paddock, but we've never driven together, so kind of getting a feel for how each guy, prefers the car. And that was a good learning experience. It was good that we had a lot of track time. I think at the end of the night, last night we felt like we had a good car on the long runs, but we had to make some setup changes to make it better for qualifying. And Robbie just did a qual sim and went P1. So we're kind of, I think, looking in pretty good shape. And one of the things I love about SRO, it's my first weekend doing a full SRO race aside from 24 Hours of Spa, but at least in America, joining SRO. And one of my favorite things about SRO is that every driver has to qualify, and then you take the average. So instead of picking a guy and watching him go, it's up to all of us to get the job done. So that's what this session for me is all about, is figuring out how this tire reacts to, to getting the peak out of it for qualifying.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, by 0.3 of a second, Robbie Foley is at the top of the time charts right now. And John Edwards made a good point there. And Calvin, you can talk to this. When you've got multiple drivers in the car and they all have their responsibilities, how do you arrive at a compromised setup?
Oh, quick spin here for the 94 car. That's one of the other BMWs in the field. That's Bill Auberlen behind the wheel. That's what really makes the magic in terms of finding typically a couple of drivers. This weekend, 3 drivers with a longer vent there. There we see the spin there from Bill. I assume it's just maybe cold tires that caught him out there with that quick rotation. Obviously, there's an allotment of the tires that you got to be careful of if you should flat spot. You are allowed 4 Joker tires during the course of the weekend, so if they have been damaged, there is the opportunity, possibly after consultation with Pirelli and then the series, to have one of those switched out. But yeah, it's really the magic that's all about. And sometimes when you have the Pro-Am drivers in the Pro-Am class, that's really the key ingredient, because you can have a car that's super edgy, super fast for the pro, and he can handle it. Yeah. See another car off here. I wonder if there's some fluid down or something. Is that the same corner, Ryan?
No, I think this is earlier in the lap.
Okay.
It's Charlie Luck going around, one of the contenders for the Pro-Am Championship in Fanatec GT North America, and beached in the gravel, which brings out a red flag just about 16 minutes into this pre-qualifying session. That was one of the storylines last year. This race, there were a lot of yellow flag periods, a lot of safety car running, not for heavy incidents, but just to retrieve cars from gravel traps. And that's something that, with the elimination of the GT4 class here this year, the stewards and everyone, the event organizers, they're hoping to prevent.
Yeah, there was certainly a lot of argy-bargy last year with the two cars and the overlap there, but I think this year should be a cleaner race, but we can see conditions can catch out drivers just by themselves. But getting back to your point, Bob, about, you know, setting up the car, I think when you got the Pro-Am lineups, that's where it gets super tricky, because the Am will not be able to handle that car that's edgy. And there's a couple of corners here, like the one coming on that front straightaway. You think, oh, you just wind through the gears and just keep accelerating. You get later in the stint, you need a car that's stable. You need the rear. Typically, the Am driver doesn't like a car that's loose, oversteering. So you need to dial in a bit more understeering of the car. But what that does is take away the ultimate lap time. So it's all about a balance. When you get to the pro lineups, John Edwards, platinum graded driver, been with BMW forever, top tier, top shelf driver. Robbie Foley is now right there as well. I mean, he's learned so much from Bill Auberlen over the last 2 or 3 years. And for Michael Dinan, he's been learning from Robbie Foley like Robbie Foley learned from Bill Auberlen. And now he's got a ton of confidence. I mean, he's coming off GT4 championships. He's one of the best starters that we've seen all season, Ryan, in terms of having that confidence in the car. And when it is like not in its sweet spot, putting it on the line. So I think for them, there will be no compromise in the setup. They can just run the ultimate setup for lap time, and all three of their drivers should be able to handle it.
Look here at the Craft Bamboo Mercedes, one of really the only international team, of course, I suppose, too, into that category, but they've been racing here in North America all season long. But great to have Craft Bamboo, the Hong Kong-based team here, and a throwback livery. They had the Moon Eyes car last year. You might remember that. This one paying homage to Theodore Racing and Teddy Yip, who entered cars in a number of different categories for many, many years in the 70s and 80s, and had a 7-year run entering cars at the Indianapolis 500. What a cool homage by the Darrell O'Young-led team to put this classic Theodore Racing livery on their Mercedes here this weekend.
Teddy Yip was such a character. If you're not familiar with the name, go ahead and open your browser and look up Teddy Yip. And what a fascinating life he led. And it's great to see that homage, as you say, to Theodore Racing here this weekend.
Had a good chat with Darrell O'Young, who's kind of leading the charge now about his history in Theodore Racing. I said, well, funnily enough, one of my best mates is Tommy Byrne. He drove for Theodore back in '82 in Formula One. He said, oh, I know Tommy. Tommy coached me when I was doing Formula Renault. So it's amazing that such different eras, but suddenly we all sort of like circle back and have some common ground together. And Darrell O'Young, still a racer. He raced at the Singapore Grand Prix support event last weekend.
That's right. Finished second, he told us, there on the Singapore Street Circuit in support of the F1 race just 1 week ago, and makes the trek here to Indianapolis. This team is getting some support from a North American operation, Lone Star Racing, which we've seen in and out of various championships over the past 5-10 years here in North America. They did a lot of the initial prep on the car. A few of their team members are here helping, but this is primarily the Hong Kong-based crew that's come over and is running this car for Craft Bamboo this weekend. And this is a driver lineup that makes you think they are going to be a contender after 8 hours.
Yeah, I mean, you got Marciello and Juncadella, who just come off a championship win, also won at Spa this year, and they're joined by Daniel Morad, the Canadian, who's had some stunning results, including winning the Rolex 24 5 years ago, and just he's really quick on one of these Mercedes AMG. I remember when he had his kind of coming out party with the CRP team at VIR when he beat Jeroen Bleekemolen and heads up that day, and that was like making a big statement because Jeroen was like the man. And young Daniel, I think he's one of those guys, he hasn't quite got his a firm foothold in like these top teams, but he's always on the fringes, and whenever you put him in, he's right there and has the pace of the other guys.
And back to green here for pre-qualifying, and to your point, it was great to see him. He's only run a handful of races all season long this year in various series. Was supposed to race at Spa. The car raced. He didn't get a chance to because it was out of the race before he had his chance to jump in. But he said this is a special place for him to come and get a chance to race at Indianapolis. He was an open-wheel aspirant early in his career, and he actually got to race on this road course one time in 2007, yes, in Formula BMW.
Oh, wow.
And he told us he got his Red Bull contract that lasted all of 5 months. You can add him to the laundry list of people who can relate to that. But from Helmut Marko up on the podium here at Indianapolis after winning his Formula BMW race.
Yeah, and he said Sebastian Vettel and Mark Webber said, "Oh, you're the new guy." So but he wasn't the new guy for long, unfortunately.
No, but he's carved out a nice career for himself. Looked like he was on his way, perhaps, to IndyCar fame, but found a nice spot in sports car racing. Won the 24 Hours of Daytona a few years ago in class, and again, great to see him as part of this Craft Bamboo lineup.
Funnily enough, the strategist that weekend when Allegra Motorsports won the Rolex was Spencer Pumpelly, who's an awesome driver himself, and he's actually playing the strategy role again this weekend with Realtime. So some of these there's certain drivers don't know anything about what's going on. They just plug and play and go fast, right? There's other drivers who are out there like going through points calculations, setup changes on the car, strategy, making the calls from the cockpit. And Spencer's one of those guys. Yeah. And I think he's got such a keen racing brain. I think Nathan Bonneau, Petey Cunningham made a great choice in terms of drafting him in for this 8-hour event.
Yeah, he's a really popular driver, Coach. Comes from my neck of the woods in Atlanta, Georgia, where we have a little enclave of guys like Spencer and Andy Lally and so on. And a new guy who just arrived in town, Elio Castroneves.
While we watch the U.S. Racetronics Mercedes make its way around the track, it's Tristan Vautier doing the driving right now, and Amanda is in the pits with his teammates.
Well, welcome back to this car since Road America. We did miss these guys at Sebring. And Stephen, you were the first out here for this pre-qualifying. I know you guys had a little technical issue heading into the weekend. How's the car feeling now?
So far, car's feeling really good. Yeah, the past couple days, and especially after the incident out at Road America, which, cost us to not be able to run Sebring. The car had some issues. We had to get a whole new chassis and put the car completely back together. So huge thank you and an awesome credit to the US Racetronics guys for putting that car back together. It's awesome right now the way it is. We've just been having some little wiring issues with the car, but we got it all sorted out. And now today was finally the first time we got to do an actual practice at full pace. And yeah, car feels really good, and got my crazy alien of a driver, Spinelli, here, so hoping to get some pretty good track time later today. We did do a test day, a test weekend at Indy a couple months ago, so we do have some past experience here, but just again super excited to be out here back in the paddock, so I think it's going to be an awesome weekend. You
guys have had some, I'll use the word strange incidents happen this season. How do you stay above it?
It's a really big love-or-hate relationship because we go out there almost every single race weekend besides Sebring, and we go out, put the car on pole, or at least the front row, and just something happens. And, something is literally anything. And it blown my mind away what could happen to us. And at this point, whatever happens, I'm pretty much just like, oh, okay, that's new. So let's see what can happen next.
I did hear Ryan on the broadcast at Sebring point out the stat that Loris had every pole in pro up until that point. And Loris, your first time to Indianapolis, when you drove in this morning, it's an iconic track here in America. What went through your mind?
Yeah, for sure, it's iconic track. For me, it's the first time here. It's a lot different respect a European track. So it's fun, it's really technical, it's really fast. So I'm blessed to hear. And yeah, how you said, a bit unfortunate that I cannot do 6 out of 6, but I'm really happy for the work that the whole team did this year. So now we are in Indy and looking forward for the race.
Well, as you get up to speed here at Indy, being your first time, can you pull out another pole position this weekend?
Let's see, why not? My goal is this one. Yesterday, yeah, we struggled a bit the first days here, but yesterday we were in a good position, so let's see today for the quali.
I wouldn't bet against him, guys. He has been lights out in qualifying. Again, to that point, other than the Sebring weekend that they missed, he was on pole for every race that he qualified for all season long. And that team, Calvin, they have been so fast. You heard Amanda and Steven allude to it. Everything from wheels falling off to penalties to contact. Some of it has been self-inflicted. Other things have not been, though. It has been just an unbelievable season. The pace they've shown and the fact that they have very little to show for it.
Yeah, I'm sure it's frustrating. I think they've all taken it on the chin and tried to focus forward, but when it keeps repeating, as we see the 45 with a bit of drama once again.
Is that where Oberlin went off? You could see from the tire skid marks, he just kind of looped it, pirouetted, never went off. Here he goes.
Yeah, just pinching it a little bit. Is that coming through turn 11?
Yes.
I believe it is, yeah.
Should note that we're back to the original track layout that was used for the first edition of the Indy 8 Hour. You may recall that it was a slightly different version that was utilized last year. So instead of turns 5 and 6 being just the quick chicane like we have here today and like we had 2 years ago for the inaugural running, there's that loop that was used for F1 when the US Grand Prix was here, and that was utilized last year, and that stemmed from the fact that in the previous NASCAR race earlier that year, there had been some damage to the curbs in that chicane. That's all been changed and repaired, and it survived the NASCAR weekend this year. And so we're back to that original layout, which makes that a very high-speed run, turns 4 down to turn 7 at the end of Holman Boulevard. But there is some thought that some of the drivers, at least, are lamenting having that slower loop and the run out of it to help set up a passing attempt down into turn 7.
Yeah, it's going to make it a bit more challenging because, you know, these cars are pretty aero dependent, and when you're following someone close trying to get a run at be into that brake zone and maybe make a pass down into turn 7 and even down into turn 1, you've now got 2 extremely high-speed corners through the chicane turns 5 and 6, and particularly coming through turn 14. And the drivers are saying, yeah, we definitely lose the front end a little bit. You're not getting that air on the nose onto those dive planes, so you're losing some grip there, and you're having to just crack the throttle a little bit or wash out a little bit wide, a bit more scrub. So you're not getting that launch onto these straightaways. So it's going to take a bit more discipline, a bit more timing, maybe some traffic. Certainly when you've got a pro guy going up against an AM guy, maybe a little bit easier where they're maybe able to go a little bit deeper into the brake zones. But to your point, Ryan, when we had the extra loop in there, that was more of a, you'd see more delta, more differences coming onto the front straight, whereas now it's just a wind out, flat out for everyone going through that chicane.
On board just moments ago with Colin Brown, who jumped up to the 14th spot overall, 4th in the Pro-Am class. Riley Motorsports Mercedes that is very much in the running for the Pro-Am Championship here in North America. Dropping back, this is one of the interesting stories this weekend and all season long. The emergence of this Triarsi Competizione team, champions in the AM class earlier this year. Conrad Grunwald jumping in aboard alongside the 2 AM class champions in North America, Charlie Scardina and Onofrio Triarsi. And Conrad Grunwald now, with his addition, this becomes a Pro-Am lineup here this weekend. The AM Championship already clinched. This man has been one of the breakout performers globally here in the last 12 months, and it really started with what he did in GT World Challenge America last year, led to drives in some of the Middle Eastern endurance races back over the winter. He was at Le Mans. He's done some races over in Europe. A really fast driver who has stumbled into a great situation with AF Corse, especially with the premium put on fast bronze-rated drivers these days.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, Conrad can really get the job done, and by maintaining that bronze rating, he's a very valuable asset for these teams who are looking. And Ryan Dial, I will say this, he does his homework. He is always sharp, looking for that little advantage, and they felt by securing Conrad's services, then they really had the best potential bronze here to match up with he and Justin this weekend.
And apologies, he's joining Justin Wetherill and Ryan Dial here this weekend. The sister car has the Onofrio Triarsi and Charlie Scardina brother-in-law tandem that won the M-Class championship this year.
Yeah, they've been a tough pairing. We saw them in Nashville where they just went 1-2 at both ends of the weekend with ease, and they just pulled away from the field.
Yeah, they dipped their toe in the water at the Sebring event last year, but just over a year ago, obviously. We just got through Sebring in the penultimate round of our championship in 2022 and had immediate pace. And they're coming back this year with the Triarsi team. Just lots of really key, experienced engineering people there, so they've got all of the ingredients to do great things moving forward.
Just under an hour remaining in pre-qualifying, and Amanda has found another star of international GT racing down in the pit lane. She's standing by with Jules Gounon.
And it's a very big weekend for Jules. If he wins here in Indianapolis, he'll go ahead and wrap up the Intercontinental Series. That's kind of some pressure on you. What are your feelings heading into the weekend, Jules?
Yeah, I don't think there is any pressure because at the end we are enjoying. We have won the last 3 IGTC race with Mercedes AMG, which was a new record, so it's something unbelievable. It's really cold today, so it's a complete new, different session compared to the 2 previous days, so let's see how it goes.
If you watch the Spot 24-hour, there was a moment on the Eau Rouge with Nikki Timman. You were just telling me an incredible story about the aftermath and going over to talk to him. What happened?
Well, I don't know if I can say it on TV, but yeah, I love Nicky because it's Nicky. You know, he doesn't care. He's himself, and as I told you, I went to see him after my triple because I wasn't sure what's going to happen. And I see him from far. He was waiting with both arms open, and I was like, are we going to fight or what's going to happen? And he said, man, you have got a big pair of balls, sorry to say it. So congrats. And I said, well, I'm sorry. And he said, no, it was a hard fight. You won, so I'm happy. And that's why we love Nicky also. You know, he's just himself. He's not political. He just say what he thinks. And the interview you had with him was also very funny. For sure it was funny because we won the race, but it was still a funny moment.
Congratulations again on the win. It was watching you guys the last 2 moments as you and Danny were taking it in and processing the win. How did you guys celebrate off property?
Yeah, we had a big celebration later. I joined my girlfriend at that time, so for me it was something amazing also to share with. But you know, last year it was really disappointing for us. We were leading the race, car was amazing, and we had a damper failure. So we were so motivated, and the whole objective of the year, the whole target was to win Spa, and we did it. So it's still an amazing feeling to think that you win such a big race.
Good luck this weekend.
And it's so contradictory to be talking about a driver with large attachments and he wears a hat like that, don't you?
Well, what a season he has had here this year. The Frenchman, a champion in GT World Challenge Europe Endurance Cup. You mentioned, we heard the discussion about the win at Spa. He brought up the fact that he won at Bathurst in the first round of Intercontinental GT Challenge powered by Pirelli earlier this year with Kenny Habul and Martin Conrad and Lucas Stoltz. And that Sun Energy One team is here this weekend, but he's not a part of it. He's also in the midst of a title challenge in ADAC GT Masters this season. He's done some British GT. We've seen him do all kinds of different things. It's been a remarkable season for Jules this year. Yeah,
and he's bounced around the manufacturers over the last handful of years as well. So, and I understand there's going to be a big shake-up in some of the top stars this year between now and 2023 season. Lello Marciello is rumored to be maybe making a move. We'll see if that's reality or just a rumor, but lots of stuff happening.
Should also add podium finish overall at the 24 Hours of the Nürburgring this year for Gounon. So yeah, it's been a great season for him, and he'd love to cap it off with an IGTC crown, a good result here at Indy. And he's got the team to do it here this weekend, that's for sure, as we watch the Daniel Serra driven AF Corse number 71 Ferrari with the Francorchamps Motors sponsorship that has adorned these cars for the bulk of the past couple of seasons.
I'm digging for a fact. If I find it, you'll be amazed.
I'm ready.
Okay.
Standing by for a Bob Varsha factoid with 55 minutes left in the session. Dynan, Goikberg, Baumann, the top 3. Baumann, that is part of the Kenny Habul Sun Energy One team. Just a few moments ago, went to 3rd overall. Currently the quickest in the Pro-Am class. Then you find Daniel Serra, this driver, this car. Currently 4th fastest. Pierre Roggen, the sister car, is 5th. Conrad Grunwald, 6th. And on down the line. These drivers putting the cars through their paces on a cold morning in Indianapolis.
Yeah, and those fast times are alluding to the car's best. It's not necessarily the driver that's behind the wheel right now. For example, Michael Dynan is out there cutting some pretty sharp laps himself, but it was Robbie Foley who laid down that fastest time of the day so far, just a couple of hundreds ahead of the number 3 K-Pax car. I think it was Frank Pereira behind the wheel who set that time. Frank with a C, by the way.
He probably made that clear. Going back to Jules Gounon for a moment. Yes, he's going for a sweep, his third straight IGTC race victory of 2022, but he's actually going for 4 in a row because the Kyalami 9-hour that was supposed to wrap up the 2021 season was postponed to February, and he won that. So this could be his 4th victory in a row, and with different colleagues in the car.
I always thought there was something fitting about him racing here at Indianapolis too, because the first international winner of the Indianapolis 500 back in 1913 was a gentleman named Jules Gounon, G-O-U-X.
Yeah.
And Gounon, obviously no relation, but I always thought there was some nice symmetry to it. Well, maybe there is. Maybe I should ask. But as far as we know, there isn't. But anyway, that always seemed fitting to me when he showed up here at IMS for the 8-hour.
I'll let you track that factoid down.
Good luck.
That goo is for you.
James Safronis, one of a handful of AM-class entries here this weekend. GMG Racing, the team.
And just to point out on the graphic, when you see class and the number, it's not a class of 6. It's their 6th fastest in their class at this point in time. I just figured that out, so I thought I'd share it.
Well, that's good, yeah.
And I was wrong. He's actually in a Pro-Am entry this weekend. He and Kyle Washington have driven in the AM class in a couple of races this season. Fanatec GT World Challenge America, powered by AWS.
That was tight there. Almost dropped a wheel there through that high-speed turn 11. Seems like that's becoming a bit of a problem area today. We'll see if that trend continues throughout the course of the weekend. But great to see James back. What's he done, like 250 plus now? World Challenge events
he's been
over the
doing
years.
this for a long time.
Doesn't seem to slow down, and he's got that bronze moniker as well. So see what opportunities that creates for him moving down the line.
I wonder if it's wind affecting the cars there in 11.
Yeah, I think it could, because we talked about as a headwind down there, which would basically be a headwind as you're coming and pushing the car out wide as you're coming through turn 11 there.
This is a peek at Jeff Westphal driving the Andretti Autosport with Vital Speed Ferrari. The Vital Speed team was here a couple of years ago for the inaugural running of this race. Jeff Westphal, Ryan Briscoe, who's with him this weekend, and Trevor Beck were the lineup in that first running of this race. Jarrett Andretti, the son of the late John Andretti, nephew of Michael Andretti, and grandson of Aldo Andretti, who is Mario's twin brother. He is the 3rd driver in this lineup. This is the one Ferrari that is not up to the 2020 Evo spec in this field, and they've really been hunting for pace throughout the course of this weekend, but right now, slotting in a decent spot, actually, up in 12th overall, 8th in that pro class.
Yeah, and only half a second off the fastest time of the day. So there was some discussion about the BOP, balance of performance, as we call it, between the new Evo Ferrari and this one. So I'm not sure if they got any help overnight or not, but certainly talking to Ryan Briscoe yesterday, he said, we're up against it. We're just a long way down in terms of top speed, 6-7K. And that's hard to fight with if you do have that deficit down these 2 long straightaways here. So, but great to see them back. Great to see the Andretti name back. Jarrett coming off a brilliant run at Petit last week where they won in LMP3 for Andretti Autosport. So he's on a bit of a high at the moment.
Yeah, Jarrett Andretti is definitely his father's son. Just like John, he is very easygoing, smiling all the time. Great kid.
And he'll drive anything, too.
And he'll drive anything, yeah. He's got dirt track, sports cars, open wheel, you name it, in his background.
Actually made one start on the IMS Oval. He drove in the Freedom 100 in Indy Lights a couple of years ago. Had to leave the SRO America round in Canada early to get down there, actually, if memory serves, a couple of years ago. And contested that race in a car that was entered by his uncle Michael. When you think of Indianapolis, the name Andretti comes up very, very quickly, if it's not the first name that comes to mind. And it's a special place for the whole family and certainly for Jarrett as well.
Big break zone here. I think later in the stint, this could create some overtaking opportunities when the tire deg starts to kick in a little bit. Having said that, Ryan, we've been amazed this year at the performance of these Pirelli tires. It seems like as the fuel burns off, the cars seem to get quicker and quicker. So They really have great consistency during the course of what we typically have 40 to 50-minute stints. Obviously, it's a longer period here with the 65-minute maximum stint time here. So I think be curious to see that last 15 minutes or so, whether we start to see a little fall off there this weekend, even though the conditions are obviously very mild.
Might be worth chewing on that a little bit for those tuning in that typically follow the North American Championship. You're used to the 90-minute races, the mandatory pit window where the pit service must occur within a 10-minute prescribed window right in the middle of the race. That mandatory window is out here. The real limiting factor is a maximum stint length in terms of time, 65 minutes. But beyond that, the strategy is really up to these teams to identify.
It is. If you take any fuel, whether it's a splash or a full fuel load, you've got to be on pit lane for a minimum of 92 seconds. You do have 3 jokers to play with, so that's 3 one-second jokers during the course of the race. You can't take 3 seconds at once. It's 3 times 1 second. You can be underneath that without getting the drive-through. And there's also the ability to reset that drive time. So if there's enough fuel on board, we saw Peter Barron do this WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca many moons ago with great strategy by driving the car down pit lane, resetting the drive time, and that gave them victory that day. This year, they've changed the rule a little bit. You have to come into your pit box, stop the engine, restart the engine, but that shouldn't take more than 2 or 3 seconds. So it's really a drive-through, which would be pit lane delta is 52 seconds, so probably with the start call around 55. So that's a big difference between taking fuel and not in terms of the amount of time that you're on pit lane. I think we could get a caution in that last 70 minutes of this race. Look for some of these teams to really play that strategy in terms of resetting the drive time, being able to get to the checkered flag without having to come back to the pit lane.
We know these teams have been poring over the rule book and the supplementary regulations. In fact, some of the teams actually were consulted on how these rules should be structured here this year, which seems like a proactive and positive thought from the organizers, because really, if you want someone to pick apart a rule book, start with the likes of a Mike Johnson or a Thomas Blum, or you pick your Don Salama, just up and down the pit lane. These guys that are renowned for finding the loopholes, they're the ones you want on your side when you're creating your rule set.
Well, they're the greatest resource, and
Right.
they're right in the palm of your hands, so sometimes it's hard to accept, like, maybe they know more than we do. But as you said, I think they did it right this year. They talked about all of the what-ifs in terms of the complexity of the safety car and where to release the safety car, and we'll get more into that once we get into the race conditions here tomorrow. But, yeah, I think it's very smart, and I think, as you said, there's some amazing brains. It's a bit like NASCAR kind of grabbing the biggest cheaters in their business to come and police their tech.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I was going to make the point that a lot of these teams that just do the 40 or 90-minute World Challenge races during the course of the year are otherwise at a bit of an experience and information deficit when it comes to going for 8 hours and the kinds of strategies you've been talking about. So to get someone with that experience on board would be critical for this weekend's racing, I should think.
We've seen it be the case in the past, especially going back to when the 8-hour round in IGTC was held in Laguna Seca. So often those races were determined by the calls up on the pit box, and there were some pretty interesting interpretations of rules. There was one year with the drive-through penalty being less disadvantageous than actually abiding by the minimum pit lane delta. I think Peter Barron was at the heart of that one too. So there are some really interesting stories at up and down pit lane. I think these strategists, they love finding a little way to wiggle their way through a loophole and find a way to give their team the edge. We expect this race to be very close. That was a bit of a ride over the curb there for James Sifronis. But talking to the drivers, especially without the GT4 cars, it sounds like they're expecting everyone to be very close in terms of ultimate pace, and it's going to come down to these little things. The driver might be able to extract a little bit more to make a difference. It might be the pit crews that make a difference with the pit stops, and it very well might be the strategy that ultimately dictates the outcome, not just of this race, but of the many championships that are up for grabs at the 8-hour mark.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a fascinating race, and we're looking at Jan Halen here aboard the Wright Motorsports. We said they're leading in the Pro-Am class with double points on hand here this weekend. So 50 for a win versus the normal 25. He's just had a little recce lap there. It's Charlie Luck who was out there. He had a couple of spins, so maybe he's just asking Jan to feel this car out. Maybe they made some changes overnight that the drivers are not quite liking, or just the conditions much cooler, and with that wind, as you said, Bob, could be affecting these cars through a couple of the high-speed corners.
Conquest Racing, what a great story they were at Sebring, the last round of Fanatec GT World Challenge America, powered by AWS. Manny Franco joined Alessandro Balzan, and they had a very good run, including a podium overall in the second of 2 races there that weekend. No Manny Franco in the car here this weekend. It's 3 pros in this machine for Eric Bachelard's team, a team that's no stranger to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. But,
come on, let's have your first crack at the driver's name.
All right, Cedric.
The entertainer. No, sorry. Go for it.
Spirzuoli.
Spirituali.
All right, we've been working on this one, and it just hasn't stuck. So I've got 8 hours to figure it out tomorrow. But Cedric, a Monegasque driver, very, very quick, and has had a chance to jump in here to this car, and they should be a contender.
I think I had your version for dinner last night.
Yeah, Eric Bachelard's been doing this a long time as well. I think his team, not his driving career, but his team is celebrating its 25th year. Of course, he was an IndyCar driver, drove in all sorts of series, has had quite a career as a team owner as well.
He competed against Brian Till, our race director in Indy Lights at the same time. I think Eric won the championship the year that Brian was competing there.
And Belgian by birth, but has been situated in North America for quite some time, pursuing first his driving career and then very successfully in team ownership, running cars in IndyCar for a long time, transitioned to sports car racing. And really in recent years, Ferrari Challenge has been where he's been most active. They've been running some GT4 programs within SRO America. But when they burst onto the scene at Sebring, Calvin, they weren't messing around. They were on pace right away. No surprise for someone like Alessandro Balzan, but Manny Franco, who comes from a little bit of GT4 experience and a little bit of Ferrari Challenge experience, by the end of that weekend, he was turning lap times not far off from some of these established pros.
Sensational. I mean, that's not an exaggeration. What he did that weekend with his amount of experience to get in one of these GT3 cars and be comfortable. His pace was phenomenal, but then being out there amongst it, he was not intimidated whatsoever. We saw him here yesterday. He's really here just to observe. He's committed to the program for next year. He's already signed up. He's very excited about that. They're getting that new Ferrari in the off-season to start for next year. I'm really just trying to evaluate who I want beside me. Now, Alessandro Balzan, 3-time GT champion here in North America. To me, it'd be tough to beat, but there's obviously some other fun and fast guys that they got there this weekend for him to take a look at as well. And also, it's not just so much the job you do behind the wheel, but also the chemistry and how you work together behind the scenes. So I think Manny's done a great job of doing all of his due diligence. He felt that there's a bit too much pressure this weekend for him to be competing, so he's elected to stand back and let the pros take over that car. But you know, for that team to come in, they got great Chachi engineers, that car, who's got a lot of experience with the Ferraris over the years with teams like ESM. So they have the right people there. And with Eric, I think having a driver who's kind of steering the ship is always a great asset to have with any team.
There was a point there. You saw the corner speeds at turn 6. That's coming out of the chicane onto the long Holman Boulevard straightaway. And Colin Brown, who's on the driver's strength for this car, the CrowdStrike car, number 04, is over 2 miles an hour quicker than anybody else coming off that corner. So that can be very handy when you get to the braking area at the other end.
It's also handy to be able to plug in a bronze-rated driver like Ben Keating into this lineup alongside Colin Brown and George Kurtz, who are pursuing that Pro-Am championship. And Ben Keating's driven with them here before. They've had success here before. Just an amazing story. Someone who found motorsports late in life, but has just impressed year on year. Doesn't matter what kind of car you throw him into, anything from a prototype to a GT car. He is quick, and he's busy this weekend because he's also running in the Viper Challenge thing that's running here too.
Yeah, he was once, it may still be, but I think he sold the dealership. He was the highest volume Viper dealer in the world.
That's the business.
Travels the world, as you say, races everything, sometimes a couple kinds of car, whoops. Sun Racing machine is in the 75.
Kenny Hobble.
Kenny behind the
Hobble,
wheel right
yeah.
now.
Veteran
The boss.
driver and team boss,
How
yes.
cool was it that he won Bathurst? He owns a house now on the Conrad
Yes.
Strait, I believe.
That's right.
So I can't imagine the party after that,
Oh,
because Kenny likes to light up a little bit.
Yeah, he's Australian by birth, I believe. Made his money in the oil business down there, and another guy that just races everywhere to scratch that itch. And yeah, winning Bathurst is a pretty significant thing.
Solar energy has been his business as of late, hence the Sun Energy One.
There you go. Yeah,
On
I
the
said
car.
oil. Energy was right.
But fantastic to have him back again, contesting the entire IGTC, where he's seeking a season-long class championship. Well, we talked about the Conquest story earlier in the show, and I think Amanda's got more on Eric Bachelard's team.
Yeah, I'm standing by with Manny Franco right now, and I will say, to be on pit lane and to see Manny in jeans, this is not always normal, Manny, but sitting out here this weekend, how hard is it for you to just sit back and watch?
I mean, it's definitely difficult to see the other drivers, take part of the Indy 8-hour. It'd be awesome to be out there, but I have plans currently with Conquest for the future, and that's kind of what I'm looking at. So.
The guys in the booth were talking about some of those plans that might exist next year, and when you look at your development and what your hopes are, I know that this weekend might be a little bit of a tryout for a potential teammate. What are you looking for?
Yeah, definitely for a teammate, we're looking for pretty much obviously pace, but decision making and the sorts of that.
We were talking about the success you guys had at Sebring so quickly, and Cal was giving a lot of credit to you of how quickly you've come into pace in the Ferrari. Is it innate talent, Manny? Where does this come from for you, in your opinion?
I mean, from the pros and everyone that I've worked with, they tell me that it's natural, and I don't know where it comes from. So.
Well, we'd love to see you in the paddock. Good to see you, Manny.
Yeah, thank you.
We're doing some significant beating around of the bush when it comes to the plans for that team in the future. Sounds like maybe they're thinking multi-car effort.
Well, he definitely didn't mince words talking to Calvin. And,
yeah, he said he signed the deal and they got the new car on order, and I think the final piece of the jigsaw puzzle is just who his teammate will be. So here we see a 38 car. This car was very fast here. This is the ST Racing M4.
So at the 10 in the wheel, at the wheel.
Whitmer, well, that's through the chicane. It's unusual to lose it there.
Yeah, the word has been that that's been easy flat in these GT3 cars, especially once tires are up to temperature. And Samantha goes around, made her Spot 24 debut earlier this year. Been very busy with endurance racing internationally, but right now she is stuck facing the wrong way at what we've already discussed is a very high-speed part of this racetrack. That can't be a comfortable feeling.
Always had the most awesome liveries. They Van Gogh inspired, correct?
Yes,
Well, they
Starry
have been,
Night,
yeah.
I believe.
Unless
is
you're
the
Dutch, in
inspiration.
which case it's Van Gogh.
As my wife frequently tells me, art history major.
And a buddy of mine who we used for Spanish-speaking group, and I said, we got some people from Portugal. Can you do Portuguese? He said, yeah, I just throw a couple of marbles in my mouth and away.
Here is Kyle Washington. We saw James Safronis in this car. I think actually when that car went jumping over the curbs a little while ago, Kyle might have been doing the driving. And he's got an off-road racing background, trophy trucks and things of that nature. So he's not afraid to stick it up in the air a little bit if necessary. But probably not the quickest way around IMS in a GT3 machine. He's down in 22nd overall, 10th in the Pro-Am class as we look in once again on Jules Gounon, whose excellent season we've already chronicled, joining Winward Racing here this weekend.
Times are so tight, just over a third of a second separates the top 10 right now. So expect some really fierce competition when we get to quality this afternoon, and then ultimately the top 10 pole shootout.
We do go red here, presumably for the Samantha Tan BMW, but you're exactly right. The top 10 really is what we need to be keeping our eyes on, because if you want a shot at the pole, top 10 is what it's going to take in the qualifying session. And the qualifying format for IGTC is very interesting. We heard that referenced earlier that all three drivers take part. It's an average of the three best lap times from each of the three drivers. and then the top 10 head to a pole shootout. That is a single driver format. The driver needs to be nominated well ahead of time. That ultimately determines the top 10 starting positions.
Yeah, so everyone plays their part. I think it was John Edwards who was
Yes.
talking about liking that with the SRO format. And but then you select your hot shot, or you feel is kind of feeling it here this weekend. So many of these teams are so equally matched in terms of their pro drivers, but someone may be feeling a little bit more than others, and they'll put them out for that quali run. Ultimately, that'll set the grid for tomorrow for the top 10. So Samantha's got it turned around, back underway, so this should be a relatively brief disruption of this session.
That's good. All track time is valuable, especially in preparation for this 8-hour race and with qualifying coming up. I'm curious, Calvin, what do you think? What is the focus here? We heard an allusion to doing a quali sim early in the running. Is that the main focus here, or are you doing some long-distance race running in these conditions that should be pretty similar to what we'll see towards the start of the race tomorrow?
Yeah, I think both. I mean, you certainly want to see, you know, what do we need to do to get the car on sticker tires? What's the balance like on the sticker tires? Do we need to make an adjustment when we put fresh tires on for that quali run? What is the balance like? But it's an 8-hour race, so I think the more important factor in terms of being in victory lane at the end of those 8 hours is what that car is going to be like in those last 15, 20 minutes. So I'd be more focused on the long runs if it was me.
I wonder, too, we often hear it about these races that end at night, about setting a car up to be good in the night conditions. We don't get a ton of night running per se here. Sunset should be just about 20 minutes or so before the end of the race. I mean, it's well and truly dark for the final 15 minutes is the way it's shaping up. But even still, as the temperatures come down in that final hour, how much do you compromise your car for the first 7 hours to make sure you're in the optimum window for the final hour?
Yeah, it's a tough one because that's pretty brief. I mean, it's going to be the last stint or two, and you're running an 8-hour race, so you've got to be in position. You can't have a car that you're losing, you know, best part of a lap or maybe, you know, deep in the pack, and then you got, okay, you got the fastest car, but you got 10 cars to pass. So that's also a compromise there to a certain point. So I think other races will run a little bit deeper into the twilight and a little bit more cooler conditions. Yeah, I don't think you'll compromise it a lot, but it's going to be a cool day tomorrow anyway. It's not going to be dramatically different to what we'll see for that last hour or two, but certainly if you get a reset and you're all running together and your car's really dialed in for those last few minutes when it's at its coldest, you could have an advantage.
It was a quick interruption. That's the good news. The green flag waves above IMS once again. 32 minutes left in pre-qualifying. The session that would set the grid should, for whatever reason, we lose our qualifying session later on today. Barring that, it's simply an additional 90 minutes of practice for these teams. Part of Fanatec GT World Challenge America, powered by AWS, and also the second to last round of Intercontinental GT Challenge powered by Pirelli, which started at Bathurst back early in the summer this year, a different date than we're accustomed to for Bathurst, then advanced over to the Total Energies 24 Hours of Spa here at Indianapolis, and then wraps up this year with the Gulf 12 Hours, where we're expecting a massive entry list, close to 40 cars. My understanding is they're oversubscribed in terms of interest for that event, which is a phenomenal addition to the IGTC calendar. And then we look forward to having Kyle Lamy rejoin, looking ahead to next year.
Yeah, and I think the intent, Bob, with this championship with the IGTC was to really use domestic-based teams to run these manufacturer-supported programs. And we're seeing that with Lone Star, for example, supplying the equipment for the Bamboo team this weekend. But just getting ahead to that weather for tomorrow, I just took a look here at the forecast. It's supposed to be about 52 degrees when we get the green flag here tomorrow, raising up to about 58 mid-afternoon. And then as we get towards the finish, back down to 52 at 7 p.m. and 49. So the start and finish are not going to be dramatically different, so you're not going to get that big swing like we've seen in years past.
Yeah, to your point about the manufacturer-supported privateer teams who compete for the championship, part of that was to make the series more attractive to manufacturers because they didn't have to fly teams and cars and equipment all over the world. They could just get their privateers out there. And of course, that's an idea that really appeals to these privately owned teams and the drivers who love the idea of that kind of racing.
Also a feather in their cap as well, Ryan, to be selected to, you know, for Mercedes, AMG, or whoever it may be, Ferrari to select a team and say, you know, we respect what you're doing on your soil, and we want you to represent our brand for this global championship.
And a great example of that actually is DXDT, for instance, which trots out an all-pro lineup for the first time in that team's history, if memory serves, here this weekend to serve on behalf of Mercedes-AMG. And that's, again, the spirit of what IGTC was designed to do. It hasn't always been that way, though. You look at some of the globe-trotting teams, the WRT comes to mind, or really just look at the history of this race. It was won by Santalok last year, and it was won by Valkenhorst the first year, which obviously are not North American-based teams. So we haven't seen as much of that, although with travel being more cost-prohibitive, both air and sea freight these days, post-COVID, I think we're starting to see more of that, and maybe the series returning to its roots to some degree. Certainly what we saw in Bathurst, here at Indianapolis, and it should be more international, it sounds like, for the Gulf 12 Hours, but still an interesting dynamic and in many ways good to see. But maybe the glaring omission on the entry list here this year is no Audi, and that's worth talking about because it's the first time in the history of Intercontinental GT Challenge powered by Pirelli there have been no Audis on an entry list, and especially the chance to come back and defend their win here. I know from interviews and things I've read from Chris Ranka, who heads up the Audi Customer Racing division, they really wanted to be here, but just couldn't find a North American partner.
Well, I think it's kind of a bigger picture of what we're seeing with Audi Motorsport here in North America. They don't have that many teams any longer competing with their equipment, and I think there was a big emphasis and shift towards their potential entry into Formula One.
Right.
And I think because of that, the resources are limited these days, and they kind of took a little step back, is how I see it from the outside, in terms of their supporting of GT racing.
Right.
And you get to an event like this, it's like, okay, we're on US soil. Well, guess what? There's been a fallout by this change of direction to the point that you're struggling to find teams that have current equipment available here in the States.
And it's interesting. Yeah, the LMS Audi was getting a little long in the tooth, but it was a remarkable reversal by Audi. In fact, they had a program underway to join the Le Mans hypercar battles next year, and they just dropped the program entirely, just cut it off. Whether the Formula One investment has something to do with that, it's hard to say. But as you pointed out, Ryan, defending champions of this race, car on the cover of the program, 4-time IGTC champions. That's a lot of legacy to have to walk away from for whatever reason.
But the good news is there still is a huge amount of manufacturer involvement here this weekend. You look at the brands represented, and it's in many ways a who's who of sports car racing, barring the glaring omission as mentioned. And great to see cars that are on the newer edge, like this BMW M4 GT3. John Edwards just went off right there at the end of Holman Straightaway, turn 7, so testing the braking capabilities on these Pirelli tires of that car. And then you get the Ferrari 488, a venerable car in its history and its various evolutions. It's now won something like 500 races, I think, going back a couple of weeks with a win in DTM. And then everything in between, some of the cars that are a few years old, all racing together here in GT3 spec, and so much excitement about what's to come in GT3 racing with the likes of the Ferrari 296 that is coming, the new generation Porsche as well comes to mind, and a lot of things in the works for upgrades to current cars or new cars altogether coming in the next couple of years.
Well, SRO, the Stefan Rattel organization, has always been excuse me, on top of things in terms of what they perceive their customers want to go race. And those customers are both the privateer teams and the manufacturers. So with this news of Audi not being here, Porsche only has 2 cars in the field. Yeah, there are programs down the road, so it'll be interesting to see how the organization responds to that, if they need to change some rules or some formats or some schedules and whatever it takes.
Fastest time of this session so far remains that early lap by Robbie Foley, 122.522. The number 3 car, I think it was Frank Pereira, laid down at 122.541. So not much to choose between them, but as we've said, that top dozen cars look really, really close. Well, it goes deeper than that. If you look at, what do we got? The top 20 separated by just over a second. So incredibly tight field.
Top 4 by less than a tenth It's 94 thousandths from first back to fourth. So, yeah, it is remarkably close at the very front. Checking in here on Martin Conrad. In one car we should not have any trouble identifying even in the nighttime. The vibrant Sun Energy One livery on the car that he shares with Kenny Hobble. Dominic Baumann was quick in that car earlier today. And again, one of those drivers that won overall at Bathurst earlier this year. And Martin's been busy racing an International GT Open this season, where he is challenging for an AM-Class championship here in 2022, but found the time to come stateside and contest the Indianapolis 8 Hours with Sun Energy One.
And Baumann has good history here in North America and with the Lexus team in GT3 competition. Had a couple of wins, maybe 2019 off the top of my head. But yeah, so they've got a really strong lineup and have good history here. And as you said, Kenny loves his racing. He's obviously got a good partner here in Conrad, who seems to be able to deliver. So they've had some great results. And this is a team that in the past has used Gradient Racing as a US domestic-based team, but this weekend it is different.
Yes, that's right. And I think it's Codis ASP that's helping them out here this weekend, if memory serves. That's the old ACA ASP team that has undergone a name change in the last 12 months and a little bit, maybe a different ownership to some degree too, but they've been as active as ever, campaigning Mercedes primarily in Europe, but helping a number of different programs out. And that is the fastest car in the Pro-Am class right now, third overall, thanks to Dominic Baumann's lap earlier in the running. A couple of Ferraris running together, Triarsi Competizione, the red one, and the blue of Alessandro Balzan. We heard from Manny Franco, who drove alongside Alessandro earlier at Sebring, as we've chronicled, part of this excellent three-driver lineup for Eric Bachelard's Conquest Racing team.
Great to see Balzan back. He had some health issues dating back 2 or 3 years, which kept him out of the seat for a while. So just really a fun personality, great passion, loves Ferrari, of course, associated with that brand for a number of years now. And just top-notch, just super, super consistent, really, really fast. And he was the teammate with Christina Nielsen when she won her 2 championships.
Consistent and fast, that's what you want in an endurance race especially, right?
And don't use up the race car before you give it to a colleague.
Yeah, and I think he fits all of that criteria very, very well. I'd say if one thing, and it's not a criticism, it's just really an observation watching him over the years, is that when he's out front, he just pours it on, just keeps delivering. When he gets in the thick of a battle, I think his nature, his personality doesn't make him feisty in terms of that out-and-out race and duel. Do you know what I mean? I watched him go up against Andy Lally once at Coda a few years ago, and he literally sat on his tail for 45 minutes. Yeah, and didn't like stick it down the inside. So I think that's the respect that he has for the equipment. He'd rather be consistent, look at the big picture, score points. And that's what got him his 2 championships with Christina when they drove together.
This is a cool story here. A GT3 debutant this weekend, Seth Lucas from Powell, Ohio, young man who burst onto the scene this year. Started the year in Pirelli GT4 America, the 2-driver format, very similar to GT World Challenge, or sorry, Pirelli, nope, that's not it either. GT4 European Series is what I'm trying to say. So if you're more familiar with that series, that's what Pirelli GT4 America basically is here stateside. But then made the switch to GT America powered by AWS, which is both GT3 and GT4 single driver, and won 3 races right off the bat, driving by himself in a GT4 Toyota Supra. Gets the call up this weekend to join Zalus Motorsports, and really curious to see how quickly he wraps his head around this GT3 Lamborghini.
We had a nice chat with him yesterday, and he did a few laps in the car at Sebring, and he said, boy, it's a monster. He said he can't believe, he's used to high, he's driven LMP3, so similar horsepower in terms of the power that he's got. These have a little bit more than an LMP3 car. But he said it's the braking. He said it's where he's at right now on the racetrack, how deep you can go on the brakes and have the downforce and the tire underneath you to give you that grip to really just push those brake zones. So super nice young man, 16 years old. He turned 17 in January, I think. So just one of the young stars that's really been developing through our ladder system in the SRO Championships.
And on the GT4 side, he drives for a team that has some Indianapolis legacy, Hattori Motorsports. You might remember from some kart racing and certainly in the IRL, Shigi Hattori, Japanese driver who made multiple Indy 500 starts. He's the team owner, very successful in recent years, including winning a Truck Series championship over in NASCAR, but branching into GT4 with the support of Toyota, and that's who Seth has been driving for there. But it's a Lamborghini for him in his GT3 debut here this weekend at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Shares that car, by the way, with Jason Daskalos, who it looks like he's set to finish second in the GT America GT3 points. And then Jason Harward, who's also been a contender in that championship and ran part of this season alongside Madison Snow in the North American Fanatec GT Series.
Here's Mr. Spinelli, who's just been sensational. We talked about it earlier in the show, Ryan, about his pace this year. The pole positions, he's been unbeaten when he's had the car to run qualifying this year. So now he immediately goes fastest overall for the day in Sector 1. So this could be a little quali sim that we're looking at right here for this number 6 US Racetronics machine.
Look at this, he's got a lap going. His Sector 1 shows up purple, so this might be a quali sim here for the pole master of Fanatec GT World Challenge America this season. Laura Spinelli gave a little bit back, but not much. There in Sector 2, this is Oval 1 and 2, the South Short Chute. That's the braking zone for turns 12 into 13 as they head back to the infield. And then this long sweeper, turn 14, up on the banking and onto the front straightaway, the opposite way of the famous oval here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and to the famed yard of bricks. Let's check this lap. Yeah. And Spinelli jumps to the top, a 1:22.416, puts him 1/10 of a second clear of the previous benchmark time.
Yeah, that was a nice clean lap, so we assume he's on relatively fresh or sticker tires for this run. And a brand new chassis. They had that car destroyed with that big multi-car incident on the opening lap there at Road America. So they skipped the last round of the championship. They said they could have been here, but it was going to be a thrash, and they really wanted to focus on this big event. So great to see them back. Brand new car. Did have some teething issues with it here yesterday. They did a shakedown out in California before they brought it here to Indianapolis. Had some ABS and electronic issues early, got those figured out, and now the car seems to be dialed in and pretty sharp here. Will certainly be a contender. You would think with that driver lineup, yes, they'll get into that top 10, and then I would assume they'd turn over Spinelli to try and go for the pole shootout.
That said, Stephen Agakani has been quick this year, and Tristan Vautier is no slouch in one of these Mercedes AMGs, a former Intercontinental GT Challenge season-long champion, as a matter of fact, and longtime family friend of the Agakanis. He's been really instrumental in getting Stephen up to speed. Remember, Stephen started at a really young age, like 14 years old. He was racing GT3 cars. His dad was telling us he drove, if it wasn't GT3, it was maybe a Lamborghini Super Trofeo car at age 12.
Gallardo, yeah.
Yeah, or a Gallardo, that's
sitting
it.
on a blanket, right, so he could
right.
see over the wheel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he's had some good mentors over the years, and Tristan Vautier is one of them, getting to drive with him now for the very first time.
Yeah, and you're spot on. I mean, Tristan is one of the fastest guys over a single lap. I think Spinelli would be pretty upset if he wasn't given the opportunity. He may be locking Tristan in the transporter if he did get the nod.
Tristan, of course, made multiple Indianapolis 500 starts.
It was quicker again, 22.377 for Spinelli.
Yeah, found another 0.04 of a second or thereabouts to edge a little bit further ahead of the Turner BMW, which continues to be second. Great mix of manufacturers at the front, 3 different cars in the top 3. Then you get your repeats as the Mercedes start to come into the mix again. So 3 Mercedes in the top 5. It's interesting to note. They were quick here last year too, and very well could have had a shot at the win if not for some misfortune, some strange circumstances.
We're looking at the 43 car of Erin Vogel, and she's joined with Taylor Hagler and Michael Cooper. She's been with all season long, and but when you look at the number 33, which is Winward Racing, what a role they've had since midsummer. They won 5 on the bands between here and another championship here in North America, and almost won a Petite last weekend. They were running top 3, got bumped off the road, or had a clash with a prototype machine, battled back up, and then got taken out again. So they are a team that has really hit their stride. They had a little bit of bad luck, couldn't quite get across the line, a bit like the number 6 camp have done all season long. But then they've got on this winning streak, and I think they're going to be really tough competition for the overall win here this weekend.
Well, we saw Charlie Luck have his moments in this car earlier in the session. He's out of the car right now because he's with Amanda.
I was talking to him about his experience at Indianapolis here so far, and he said that this is a track that invites you to go in too deep and then punishes you terribly for it if you do. So how do you restrict yourself from doing that, Charlie?
Yeah, so I think it's really a matter of concentration and focusing on the right thing. And so many tracks you try to vary it in as deep as you can, but here you really have to do the opposite of that. You need to make sure your minimum speed at the apex is right where it needs to be so you can go back to full power. And this place is tricky that way because I say it does. It invites you to come in strong, and then what it does is it ruins your off. And there are also corners where you have 7, 8, 9 that are right there together. If you miss one, then you have set up wrong for all the rest. So it's a very punishing place for lack of complete concentration and execution.
In the three-way battle for this championship in Pro-Am, you built a little bit of a cushion in Sebring. How comfortable are you with it?
Yes, I don't really pay attention to the points. I know this is the last race, but what we got to focus on is execution and concentration and really delivering. And that's everybody from the guys on pit road to the drivers. So the points will come. You know, we have to execute to get the points to come, so don't focus on the result.
What do you think is the secret to an 8-hour race?
Well, I'm probably the wrong person to ask that because this is my first 8 hour. So, but I think consistency, unquestionably consistency and no big mistakes. So I think at the end of the day, it's not about the quickest because you can make up the pit stops, you can make up in red and yellow flags, but you've got to be consistently as quick as you can be, and I think that's the ticket.
Would imagine your teammate and son-in-law might have some of those secrets.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Jan has done this for decades now, right? So he's a tremendous coach for Elia and I, and so, yeah, it's invaluable.
Curious to watch. You see Jan Halen there in the brake zone for turn 7. He was in the middle of the road with no other traffic around him, and he almost ran off. I wonder if he's kind of just trying to see if he's out braking someone, a new reference point and what the grip level is like there, kind of preempting, you know, traffic.
There's also a big bump in that braking area, driver's right along the edge of the road. You can see sort of the washboard effect as the tire rubber is building up. But I like your point that he's just trying to see, you know, what's the grip like over here in case I need it. And it was a great tutorial on how to get around the Indianapolis Motor Speedway from Charlie Luck. There's that washboard looking stuff I was talking about.
I see. And yeah, you can see the
So he stayed
car.
center all the way down, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
Quick look that we had there, yeah. So you can kind of miss that first big braking bump in the brake zone. But I think to Charlie's point, I mean, I think I can't anticipate someone being stuck in the gravel here this weekend and winning this race because you don't get the wave rounds, and it's going to take a while to get you out. You're probably going to go down a lap, and I think going down a lap here would be really, really difficult to get back in the game.
Definitely. Good to hear, though, from Charlie, the reigning GT America GT3 champion, stepping up to Fanatec GT World Challenge America, powered by AWS for the first time this year. And as we've chronicled all season long, getting to drive alongside his son-in-law and driver coach Jan Halen, Ilya Earhart joins them here this weekend. German driver who's had some experience in recent years driving in GT3s, but new to this race. It was strange. Did you see the Andretti car just pulled off?
Yeah, at the pit out.
Yes.
Still hasn't gained the track. He let the car behind him go by.
If they'd done a tire change or something and felt something amiss.
It's Ryan Briscoe in the car. He's he'd be pretty sensitive, something like that. Here's another look. See the flashing?
Oh no,
that's not the car.
He's on track there.
Yeah, but he does pull off. Watch this.
Yeah.
Cuts right across, so something must be amiss with that machine. And to your point, Ryan Briscoe, a veteran driver, former Indy 500 pole sitter, actually.
One of the things that they will do is actually run the car low on fuel just to see what the pickup is. So I'm not sure if they're trying to establish that at this late stage of the practice session, just see where the reserve pump is and where it cuts in, but all hypothetical, trying to understand what may have happened here.
Right now, 16th overall and 9th in the pro class.
Turned off the headlights, so he's recycling
Control-Alt-Delete sometimes works.
Unplug it, plug it back in.
It's Bimmerworld Racing. It's like a pretty substantial change. We go red, presumably for the Andretti Vital Speed Ferrari. That has stopped just past pit out.
Okay, let's see what we've got. Nothing.
But quickly back to the Bimmerworld car. We saw the changes going on under the right front fender. That's the Bill Auberlen Chandler Hull car this season. They've been really fast. They've been on the podium a number of times, still have not won, and they have a good addition to the lineup, a veteran of GT3 racing, Richard Heistand. I'm really curious to see what he can do in this BMW, which I believe he is new to here this weekend, but he's driven a car I would think would have some similarities in the Lexus, kind of a similar shape at the very least, and hopefully that would help him get up to speed.
Yeah, and I think as important to the shape as the front engine layout as well, in terms of what that typically provides the driver in terms of balance. And Richard is just, he's intense, but I like him a lot, and he's got incredible speed for a bronze driver. I think he's under consideration for reclassification, as are a handful of other guys in the field here this weekend. But what a great addition to that lineup to bring him in, and with his pace, he'll be on it.
Wouldn't it be something for them to finally get that long-awaited win? They've been on the cusp of it all year long within the Pro-Am class, and if they were to do it in a race of this magnitude, that would mean a great deal.
They won GT4 last year, right?
That does sound right.
I think, yeah. So.
But it was a big jump for them this year to run the new GT3 M4, having spent a number of years primarily with GT4 or touring car type machines. And actually, they were planning a two-car attack on Fanatec GT World Challenge America this year. Had a testing crash, and that relegated them to one GT3 car, one GT4 car. Turned out to be a pretty good thing in hindsight, though, because they won the AM Class Championship, James Clay and Charlie Postons.
Yeah, dominant season in AM. So, yeah, for James, it was, I think he was really looking forward to getting his first real taste of GT3 competition, but he defaulted over to GT4, and they put together an amazing year. So it's really just a celebration here this week and having clinched it at Sebring in the last event.
Just 7.5 minutes to go, but it does bear mentioning that the Indy 8 Hour is not the only track activity here this weekend. We have Pirelli GT4 America. We have GT America powered by AWS. TC America powered by the Skip Barber Racing School. And across the board, as we see the Ferrari getting a tow back to the paddock area, all of those are settling their championships, at least the ones that aren't already determined. Here this weekend, there is a lot at stake at Indianapolis this weekend across the board in so many different series.
You know, we talk about bronze, silver, gold, platinum level drivers. The SRO, the Rattel organization, has some definite thoughts, and I believe is helping to reshape the various considerations when it comes to rating a driver, which affects driver lineups and all sorts of classes and series like the SRO slate. And I think it's long overdue myself.
Well, you've got you've got the four grades as you mentioned, Bob, starting at the bottom: bronze, silver, gold, platinum. The golds and platinums were regarded as pros. I think the real gray area was in the silver class, where you had guys who are earning a living. Everyone knows it, and they're supposed to be an AM driver. And I think what they're trying to do is maybe shift that line a little bit, where some of those guys who are kind of semi-pro or pro drivers get bumped to gold, and maybe clean things up a little bit.
Yeah, agreed. I think across the board, everyone recognizes that tweaks are required, but there is a lot at stake for these drivers based on that categorization, what rides they are eligible for. It can affect their income opportunities effectively, for good or for ill. And if you want to see some hand-wringing in the paddock, you bring this up to some of these drivers, especially those that have been highlighted as under review. Everyone gets reviewed to some degree, but I think there are some that have been specifically highlighted here recently in relation to these proposed changes. And again, a lot rests on what these committees ultimately decide. But without a doubt, I think universally, or nearly universally, everyone's in agreement that some tweaking is required, and it's good to see that everyone from the FIA and SRO and on down the line, they've been proactive in that, seeking out a solution to some of these sticky problems that have caused some issues in sports car racing over the past several years.
It's a good problem to have,
right,
to use the phrase, because as the series grows and gets more successful, as you say, more and more is at stake, including careers, the guys that earn a living, and even the guys that don't. So it's a good thing to every now and then have a look at how you're qualifying your drivers, just as the BOP, the balance of performance, takes the measure of all the cars to create good competition. So it's a natural process.
Looking here at Frank Pereira, who set the third fastest lap of this session in the early going, still is third. The other drivers have sorted through this car, Jordan Pepper and Canadian Misha Goikberg. Pereira back in, and I'm curious what they're trying to do here with 4 minutes to go. Could they be trying to push on a quali sim? Could we see some change to what has been a fairly stagnant set of standings, really, over the course of the last 80 minutes or so?
Yeah, and I'm actually surprised that Pereira's getting this last little run here. I would have thought that Jordan Pepper, having been with a 3-team all season long and established himself as one of the top fastest guys in our paddock, would be looking to have a crack at the whole shootout later in the day, but seems like they're handing it over to Pereira to get another feel here. And just to bring up an important point, we're talking about driver gradings in the pro class this year, different to years past, even with the IGTC, you have to have a silver on board. That was a rule change in the American Championship, and with everyone coming together here for this one, they actually incorporated that into the global championship regulations for this race, different to what they had at Spa, for example.
Yes, and also different from Bathurst, where there was no pro class. Pro-Am was the top class there, as it was primarily a domestic event in terms of teams contesting that this year due to the date change. We saw Raffaele Marciello a few moments ago. Do want to congratulate him on becoming the first ever two-time overall champion of GT World Challenge Europe, which takes into account results from both Sprint and Endurance Cup. And he won his first overall championship several years ago, I think 2018, and accomplished the feat yet again here this season, and has had a phenomenal year as ever. I mean, he is one of the true talents, and that's why it makes waves when you hear the paddock rumors and see it reported places that there are rumors that he might be on the way out at Mercedes-AMG down the road. Well, something to chew over certainly in the weeks and months to come. But now it's talk to Jordan Pepper. Calvin alluded to the South African earlier. He's been a big part of this K-Pax team for a number of years now, and Amanda has found him.
And getting ready to practice one last driver change here in this pre-qualifying. And you look at the synergy that's building between this team for you guys here already this morning. When you look at how compact these cars are here this weekend on pace, how difficult is a win going to be here in Indy?
Yeah, Indianapolis, like the road course, is not the most technically challenging track that we go to on the calendar. Probably the easiest, but tracks like that is where the tiny details matter, really. Every bit of setup needs to be inch perfect. Everything on the driver's side, it's really hard to do that perfect lap here. The curbs are quite tricky, so there's a lot of time to be gained, but a lot to be lost as well. So we're making progress. I don't think we're quite quick enough just yet, but yeah, to come to win this race, I think it's going to be a lot on strategy, a lot on luck, and I think it's just going to be pace at the end who's going to determine the difference. So let's see if we have it when it comes tomorrow.
See you in qualifying.
Let's see.
Good to hear from him here at a track where, at least in my eyes, this is where I first really had to stop and take notice of just how good he was. Go back a few years to the rain at the start of the inaugural Indy 8 Hour, driving the Bentley at the time for K-Pax, and he was out on slicks. Everyone else was on wets, and he was keeping pace or going faster in some instances. It was breathtaking to watch him drive that big old Bentley around in some of the more difficult conditions you'll ever find.
He got tripped up by a GT4 car that day, unfortunately, but he's super fast, but he's such a great racer as well. I mean, there's guys who have the ultimate pace, but then in race conditions, we talked about someone a little earlier in the show who's super quick, but he's not like a Jordan Pepper who just sticks in there and is able to make some ground and move forward.
And he was in the mix to get a class win at Petite last weekend. Did enough, though, to help his co-driver, Brendan Uribe, win the Endurance Cup in IMSA. And then Brendan, who did the first 2.5 hours at Petite, jumped on a private jet, flew to Barcelona, qualified and raced in the season finale for GT World Challenge Europe in the Gold Cup there, and won the Gold Cup championship for the Endurance Cup. In back-to-back days, 2 different races, 2 different continents, 2 different tires, same McLaren chassis, but Jordan Pepper played his part in that by helping to get the job done, at least over at Road Atlanta last weekend. But Brendan Uribe, who's raced here before, what an amazing accomplishment to pull that off. 2 championships, 2 different continents, 2 days.
Yeah, it's quite the undertaking, and hats off to Bas Landers and the whole team there in terms of orchestrating that Inception Racing and putting it together. And also want to give a shout out to young Sebastian Prio. He was a monster last week, sharing that car with Brendan and Jordan, and he was really quick. I think he was, looked at the data after the race there, he was second fastest of the whole gang there. So that's a young man. His dad, Andy Prio, legend in touring cars over the air, and recently with the Ford GT team as well.
Memory serves, he drove with Brendan and Jordan at Spa this year in a McLaren also. So had some experience in that car, but to your point, yeah, instantly right on the pace. And the bloodlines are strong in that one, that's for sure. Checkered flag is out at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Pre-qualifying is complete, and Loris Spinelli showing the way, as he has so often this season in North American competition, with a 1:22.377, some 1.5 tenths clear of John Edwards, who turned in the second fastest time. That might have been Foley's time, actually,
it was, yeah,
in the Turner BMW. That was very early on in the going, but it is remarkably tight. The top 10 are separated by less than half a second. You have to go all the way down to 19th to get outside, 20th actually, to get outside of a single second to cover this field. Shaping up to be a thrilling run in qualifying later on today.
Yeah, and of note, I'd say the biggest surprise is the #1 car down there in 19th overall with Caldarelli finishing off the session. That's a team that really burst back into form at Sebring. Caldarelli's won the championship, but they kind of were limping a little bit through the summer months. Then they really found their groove again with some changes with that team for Sebring. So you see the 3 car from the same K-Pax Racing team, 3rd overall, and the #1 car down in 19th. So not sure if they didn't do any new tyre runs there to get that time, but got a little bit of work to do for this afternoon.
Well, as we heard Jordan Pepper say, you've got to be inch perfect. Your setup has to be spot on. It's a beautiful day, as you can see here in Indianapolis, but that wind continues to snap the flags. There are challenges galore as these teams get ready for the all-important qualifying, and then, of course, tomorrow's race when it will be colder, maybe as windy. We'll have to wait and see.
Who knows, but it should be fun, that's for sure. Qualifying here at Indianapolis coming up at 1:55 local time. Pole shootout to follow just before 5 o'clock here this evening. Highlights from a 90-minute pre-qualifying session. We got a chance to jump on board in a number of these cars. This is the CrowdStrike car from Riley Motorsports. All these teams putting their cars through the paces in what was, relatively speaking, a clean 90 minutes of running.
He had a couple of brief stoppages, but everyone kept it nice and clean. Should have got some good information for fine-tuning the car for this afternoon. That's going to be exciting, as we've said before. All 3 drivers play a part in the initial qualifying session to lay down their average best, and so you can make it through here. We saw Charlie Luck had a couple of spins there, so he was learning as he was going, and certainly that will be in the back of the memory bank for the race here tomorrow afternoon, not to make those little mistakes.
There we go. That was the Stephen Cameron Racing Mercedes that is making its debut here this weekend. This, though, was the Mercedes that ruled the roost with The Italian Loris Spinelli setting the benchmark time at a 1:22.377 very late in the session here on these hallowed grounds, the famed Brickyard here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Guys, should be a fun day today to set the field, and then 8 hours tomorrow. That's going to be a ton of fun to watch as well. Hope you join us, though. Qualifying coming your way, 1:55 local time here on these same sources. We'll see you then.